And active? Wonderful. Welcome to all of you who are joining us online. We do have somebody specifically monitoring the Facebook comments. And so if you have questions throughout our presentation, you can message Sarah Hasmer, who will be in the comments watching, so that we get your questions online as well.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here in person and in the virtual world. My name's Kevin Perry, and I am the chair of the Facilities Committee, which in a sense inherited the role of the trustees, and I was the chair of the trustees last year. We were approached as a congregation late last spring by the conference if we were willing to participate in a feasibility study for the area about supporting affordable housing. And our particular physical location was chosen as one of several congregations by the conference as a potentially strong candidate for some kind of future with supporting affordable housing outreach and ministry in this immediate area. As an administrative council, the trustees brought it to the administrative council. We approved the opportunity to go forward with the feasibility study, which was conducted by a graduate student from Georgetown University. And the study took place over several months, and we received some of those initial data and recommendations or the feasibility, how strong that is, late last fall. At the same, or later, a little bit later, towards the end of the summer, we put together a vision team, and really the role of these people sitting up here that you see was to receive the information and to actually gather more information, to really put it to the test, to see what the information would mean to a certain degree, and also to decide whether it was worth even bringing it forward to the congregation, right? And so our role as the vision team was just to gather this information and have it available for all of you. And then as a congregation, we could move forward in whatever way we deem appropriate for fulfilling our mission goals in this congregation. So what I'd like to do very briefly is have each member of the team just introduce themselves, name, and if there's any particular thing about their involvement in this group. I, for one, was because I was a member of the trustees, and therefore it seemed like a good fit in that way. But I'm going to turn this over to Carolyn.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Carolyn Weber. I'm on the committee. I've been a member of this church for most of my life. Spent a lot of time in this building. And over the past few months with this group, I've learned a lot about the condition of the building and what it takes to maintain it and what it'll take going forward. And I think that this is worth exploring further with your help and your input. If it's something we can do to help sustain ourselves and also do something for the people in our neighborhood and our community and maybe even in this congregation. If you lived here, you'd be home by now.
Hi, my name is Mary Margaret Stacy. At the time that this committee was formed, I was one of the trustees. I have since rotated off, but I've been involved in a number of the different kind of facilities committees around the church for a number of years.
Hi, my name is Beth Jordan. I've been a member at this church for about 15 years. And so I was really excited when Pastor Will approached me about joining the committee. I haven't done any trustee work, so I've mostly been someone who's been in the pews and teaching Sunday school. So really interesting to get to know more about the building, more about how decisions get made, more about how we vision as a community. I also do public policy work and for children and families, and housing is the number one issue for kids and families right now, a lack of access to housing, a lack of available housing. So it's really fun to get to think about how that deep policy community need might play out with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Renfro, and I've been a member of this church now for 22, 23 years about. And my interest in this particular program is to see exactly what we can do for the community and how it could best help our church in terms of our future in the long run.
Hi, I'm Ann Metcalf, and I've been a member since 2008, which, when I do the math, it's 15 years. So, and when I joined this church, Reverend Rachel said, "I think we should start a food pantry." And I thought, oh, that'll be a nice way to meet people. So I got started, and as each new food ministry has come along, I've joined up. I've been involved in almost all the ones we've done. And I know that there is an intersection between housing insecurity and food insecurity, because when people when their budgets are tight and a lot of their money is going to housing, less and less is going to food. And our mission is to feed people, body, mind, and spirit. So there's our conjunction between these two issues of affordable housing and food.
And I think I know most everybody here. I don't know if I know everybody online. My name is Will Green. I was actually not the pastor here when the Affordable Housing Feasibility Study project was brought forward to the congregation, but I've been here through most of the process. And I want to offer both a word of thanks to all of these leaders who represent a broad diversity of ministries and perspectives in our congregation, and also a couple of partners who are with us in the congregation. Rick Edson, who owns a not-for-profit or runs a not-for-profit that does this kind of work, has been consulting with us, and Michael Weincheck, who is an architect, Montgomery County born and raised. You'll see them raising their hands right back there. Have been consulting with us as well as we think about what the opportunities and possibilities might be. I want to, before we go any further, and I offer a little bit of background on some of the precipitating things that led to this moment, I'd like to invite us to just take a moment to center ourselves in prayer. Gracious God, we know that you came among us not simply to proclaim the hope of life eternal, but to meet our needs, to help us to find the ways to feed the hungry and clothe the sick, to shelter the unhoused, and to set the oppressed free. As we stand at this juncture where we have an opportunity to have conversation about how this congregation might do this in different and new ways, we pray that you would help us to maintain an openness and an attitude of curiosity in this conversation. Help us to stay laser focused on the call that you have placed on our community to feed people mind, body, and spirit so that none go hungry. And help us to marshal all of our resources, from our physical building and our financial assets to our time and talent, to making sure everything we do, every brick we lay, every dollar we spend, every life we touch, reveals that mission, shows that witness to the world. We ask this in the power of Jesus' name. Amen. So a couple of pieces of information that may be helpful clarity as we begin this conversation. The Affordable Housing Feasibility Study that we've received was a no-cost to the congregation opportunity offered by the Greater Washington District of the Baltimore Washington Annual Conference, that's a mouthful, to help congregations who have large pieces of property begin to think about how they might better utilize that property for ministry in the 21st century. Right? This program was begun by the conference recognizing a couple of things. In-person worship attendance and participation in religious activities across the board around the world is declining, which means that many congregations have buildings that are larger than the needs of their ministry or even the needs for potential growth of their ministry in the future. It was also offered to congregations in hopes that it might provide an opportunity to secure additional financial resources to help sustain the work and witness of those congregations and the locations they already occupied. So the conversation really for us is about, if we do this, how do we stay on our corner building beloved community? That's the language we've been using for generations to come. That's a part of this conversation. And the last piece of clarity, just information that I'll share, is that there are a variety of ways that we've learned that we can do this. There are a number of options for what any potential development would look like. There are a number of locations for that development. The point of today's conversation is not to get to the nuts and bolts and nitty-gritty of that yet. Today, we're inviting the congregation to receive some information and to determine whether or not we want to bless a 12-week discernment period, at the end of which we would be asked to consider making a decision about affordable housing development. Does that make sense to everybody? So today, the goal is not to make a final decision or to start picking paint colors. The goal really is to say, we feel like there might be something here that the Holy Spirit is inviting us to think more deeply about. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that in a second. Many of you who've called this congregation home for a number of years will know that this building is a big, big building. In fact, we've learned in our research that it's bigger than some elementary schools in the area. When it was built between 1963 and 1965, our congregation was approximately 6 times larger in average attendance, not in terms of membership, but in average attendance, meaning people who were present in our building, than it is today. And it was built not just to accommodate that number, but to accommodate additional growth to that number based upon the fact that when it was built, this community was growing rapidly and worship participation in Christian communities was still fairly high. Part of what happened in the history of our church is that after we built this building, faithfully seeking to serve the needs of our community, attendance almost immediately began to decline. And so what we saw year over year following the completion of this structure is declining participation, not increasing participation. That happens for a variety of reasons. It's not because of the powerful witness and ministry of this congregation. In fact, it's probably quite the opposite. It's rather the fact that the cultural and religious demographics of our area have changed significantly. So that was a helpful piece of information for me to understand that the demographic trends began to trend downward almost as soon as this building was completed. We also learned that almost as soon as the building was completed, the congregation had to begin to defer maintenance on critical parts of our infrastructure. So, since 1968, we've been actively deferring maintenance on our HVAC system. And any of you who were here in July of last year will know that we have more than reaped the rewards of that deferred maintenance. It also meant deferred maintenance to our roofs, our plumbing systems, our electrical systems, our fire suppression and safety systems, and our inability, because of increasing costs for maintenance, to do other work to the building that we felt like was important. For instance, how many of you have had to climb multiple sets of stairs already today, right? The building's not accessible, right? And that's a problem we've never quite been able to address because of the costs of simply trying to maintain the physical footprint we now have. The other thing that I'll share with you that I found really interesting, you'll find in your frequently asked questions. And so I'm going to invite you to turn to page, where is it? Page. Here we are, page 5. And if you look at the very bottom there, how do upfront costs relate to our current pledged giving? So right now we're spending about 43% of our annual budget on utility expenses because we have systems that we can't properly control and that are out of date, and maintenance costs. That approximates to about $410,000, thereabouts. Is about 43% of our budget going to nothing but paying the gas, paying for our electric, paying for maintenance. In contrast, our program budgets, the money that we set aside for music ministries, children and family ministries, youth ministries, worship ministries, feeding ministries, anything else that we do, is about 7% of our budget. So let's put that in perspective. And those numbers have been steadily declining while maintenance and utility costs have steadily increased over the last decade. Miss Marie can readily show you that 15 years ago we were budgeting $25,000 for children's ministries. What's amazing and miraculous about her work is she's able to do what she does with about $8,000 today, right? So we've got some financial challenges that we're facing as a congregation that predicated this. And the final thing that I'll share before we get into some more background, the whys of why we all wanted to participate in this conversation, is this: that as a congregation right now, we know, thanks to the work of the trustees last year and the faithfulness of the Marvin congregation over many years, that because of their work, we were able to receive the benefits of the financial income following the sale of that building. We've got somewhere between $11 and $17 million in deferred maintenance on the infrastructure systems in our building. And what that means is our electric, so all of our wiring, which is a lot of fun when you're trying to figure out what outlet's going to shock you and what's not, our HVAC, our plumbing, our roofs, and our fire alarm system, which does not actually call the fire department right now. Fire department doesn't like that too much, turns out. And we know that when we begin that work, we will be required by Montgomery County policy to put water sprinklers in our building, right? That's the work that $13 to $17 million will do. It's not replacing windows that are more energy efficient in our sanctuary. It's not asbestos abatement. It's not cosmetic work. And it's not accessibility work. It's just the stuff that we need to keep the building operational, lights on, HVAC working. We learned, too, that the value of this building, as assessed by our insurance company, is about $5 million. So it requires more money to fix the building than the building is worth, right? Which was also an interesting number for me, at least, as we were beginning to think about this opportunity. So with that, that's the background I've got to share. Is there other background, friends, that you'd like to offer, or perspectives on why this conversation felt important for you?
Now? Yes, awesome. So I was one of the folks who knew very little about the building, so it was really eye-opening and surprising to me to do. Pastor Will did a walkthrough with us, and I was so thankful to have Kevin and Mary Margaret, who knew the systems so well, also offering a lot of historical context on them. But just the challenges in the building itself, and with maintenance, but also just as a visual person, there's a lot of rooms in our basement that have a lot of strange cords and unattached large pieces of machinery, and just not being really aware of the systems that are required to keep the building running, and some of the challenges that we've had over time in keeping them functioning well, and or functioning at all even. So it was eye-opening to me as a part of this group to really finally start to wrap my head around some of these numbers that Pastor Will shared. I'll also say, as a little bit of context, I have a daughter in the youth group, and so I was fortunate enough to get to talk with the youth group a bit about their thoughts on the building and what was important about the building to them, as we're in the early phases of this. And not surprising, they are so much smarter than I am, but they are, they like having a building, but what's so important to them about their church is that it is a welcoming space for all people. The people they love, the people they go to school with, their friends, they want this to be a place where all of those people can come and join and be together and feel the love of God. So it was sort of this balance of, oh my goodness, this building has so much work that needs to be done, and oh my goodness, this building has so much potential to be a place where folks are welcomed. So those were two just big things that stuck out to me over the last few months. I don't know, others have?
Not to overstate some of these things, but things that Will has mentioned and alluded to, and Beth as well. When the trustees almost a year ago, although over the course of several years, have received news like, well, a certain system or part of a system needs a repair in order for things to even happen in the church, like the heat or the cooling or the plumbing. These aren't, as Will was saying, these are not really cosmetic or appearance things, but we feel bound to make sure that these things are functioning even in a minimal way, that so we can hold events here like services, like the concert. And one thing that I have realized in this process of meeting in this group and hearing, getting all sorts of information, is that it would be a terrible thing, actually, if the situation that we're in with some basic repairs and maintenance would actually prevent us from supporting the ministries that we already hold dear. Ann mentions the food pantry, but if we were in a situation where we couldn't safely even store food temporarily because the temperature fluctuates too much, or because things are damaged by water ingress. A couple years ago, we had to dispose of lots of printed material that was in this church because it got damp, and it all just had to go. There was no we can clean it, or it was just such a massive amount. And that's minor in some ways, right? We can move beyond that, but when we're constricted so much by the lack of accessibility with the inconsistent nature of some of the basic systems, it really at times feels pretty constraining. And then to hear from contractors who are unwilling to even look at the fire alarm system because they will not work on it because it doesn't meet code, and it probably hasn't for 20 years, if not 25, and there's no way to repair it because this sort of thing has been outdated for a long time, and it can't be replaced without other infrastructure like the wiring. And so it's a morass of almost entangling systems. And so for that to be a constriction on who we are as a congregation in the physical aspect of who we are, this has seemed to be a way to at least acknowledge and address possibilities for moving beyond that, for a rethinking of how we can minister to our community, both immediately and broadly. Else have?
Not sure. Okay, it's on. We used to do our mobile food pantries up at our building, Marvin, up at Four Corners. And we were out on the front driveway. And it was blazing hot in the summer. And then in the winter, it was bitter cold. And we said, gosh, I wish we could bring the food inside. And with the help of a lovely Capital Area Food Bank driver named Junie, we started bringing the pallets of food indoors, and the volunteers were happier, and the people could come in and sit in the sanctuary while they waited their turn to get food. And we started to form a community. We got to know each other. We got to talk to each other and hear a little bit about their lives, and they would share things with some of us. Shannon would come and read books to children. And it was so much more comfortable and nice. And now, because this space, we're not accessible again. We can't bring those pallets inside. And I keep thinking back, we've been lucky. The weather has been very mild for us. But, if we had one of those really bitter cold days, I can see people not wanting to come, volunteers not wanting to help. And, it would be so nice to have in addition to maybe to provide what we can do try to leave programs.
I'm going to tack on a little bit to what Kevin was talking about in the general kind of facilities. I think most of us would be very surprised at how large this building is. I've been a member for about 15 years. I've been on a lot of different facilities committees. I'm a former trustee at this point. I am always being surprised by a new room or a new closet or a new wholesale mechanical room in the building that is previously undiscovered. We have some ductwork so large that you can actually walk into it. But I think further to that, and to kind of go back to the visioning portion, I wanted to read something that Bill Scanlon said. He couldn't be here this morning, unfortunately. He said, "Our visioning conversations have further convinced me of the important role Silver Spring United Methodist Church has played in its members' lives and the broader community. We literally sit on historic grounds, but should never rest on what's been done. Instead, we have a historic opportunity to be a much more meaningful place of worship, place of community, and a place to raise a family." And I just want to add on a little bit to that, to my own thoughts on our visioning process, which is it's really helped me learn about the need for affordable housing in our community, and that with our property, we have a lot of resources available to us. And we can, at the same time, potentially create a more sustainable future for ourselves.
There we go. One of the stories I shared with the visioning team very early on is that when I was serving at Foundry Church, we had a gentleman that slept on our steps because our steps in downtown had both cameras and lights, and people felt safe sleeping there. And he would get up at 3 and 4 in the morning, and he would use a spigot out back to rinse himself off, and he would walk, unless he could find the money to buy transit, to Silver Spring because he couldn't afford to live here, and this was also the only place he could get a job. And then he would finish his work, and he would go back down to the corner of 16th and P, which is not quite 6.5 miles away. That, for me, highlights one of the greatest challenges facing this community, which prides itself on its economic diversity, its racial diversity, its religious diversity, that increasingly, as the economics of this region change, the diversity that we desire and that we love is actively being priced out of this community. One of the greatest challenges, and I say this as somebody who experienced housing insecurity as a child, that children face, and children make up a huge part of what we are committed to historically as a congregation, is the lack of stability and home life, whether because they're moving from apartment to apartment to apartment, or from home of a friend to home of a friend to home of a friend, that's needed for them to grow and to learn and to create stable relationships with the people around them. And that leads to long-term psychological, emotional, and social impacts for children. We're seeing that happen more and more and more right now. We sit on the largest piece of undeveloped property, one of the largest pieces of undeveloped property in downtown Silver Spring proper. And what you may not know about this congregation is that we used to sit a block and a half down the road, right about where the Arrive Tower is now. The church made the decision to move here, to add the extra space in hopes that the day would come when they would need that space, right? They were desperately and deeply committed to serving the emerging needs of their community. That's hard baked into the identities of both Marvin and Woodside, right? I mean, Woodside started as a little itty-bitty chapel right about where PJ's Coffee is now. And when they realized they weren't sitting in a place that allowed them to serve people, they picked the church up and they put it on logs and they rolled it down the street to the Spring Street location. And the first thing they built wasn't a sanctuary, it was a gymnasium because they wanted space for people to gather and play. And when they outgrew that space, they built an education wing because they wanted to create space for people to learn. And then they built a sanctuary. And ironically, they outgrew the sanctuary they built because of all the programmings they had established with the buildings that were serving the needs of the community. What excites me about this opportunity is the chance we have to embody our vision, to feed people mind, body, and spirit so that none go hungry, in the way we, not just in the way we preach on Sunday mornings, but in the way we lay our actual bricks, and in the ways that we're investing our financial resources in the building itself, both the building that we maintain and whatever building we may choose to decide to build in the future. So that's what excites me about this. Okay, well, so why don't we we're going to flip the agenda and talk for just a minute about what's actually being proposed. So let me just name a couple of guiding principles really quickly that the vision team has talked about. One is that we're committed to staying on this corner for generations to come, right? And so there's a commitment to maintaining a presence here on this corner for our community. There is also a commitment to maintaining vital spaces for children and family ministries, for worship ministries, for feeding ministries, and all the other justice ministries that we're committed to, which includes our sanctuary, right? One of the continuing conversations we've had, and we know that there are other churches that make different decisions, is that there is something about this space that is special, and that spaces like this don't get built anymore. This space becomes not just a place for us to worship, but a place for people to gather in community for public presentations, for musical presentations and concerts that extend opportunities for cultural growth in our community. And that's been a big piece of the conversation, is maintaining a portion of whatever we've got, or all of it potentially, while still thinking differently about providing housing.
So where we head from here is that as a group, we have put together some topics that we conjecture are probably on people's minds to differing degrees, like what does this mean financially for our congregation to think about? Like if we were to go forward with addressing affordable housing and using our physical location, what does that mean for us? Right? What does it mean for us in our wallets? Another would be, how does this, what does this mean from a mission point of view? Like who we are as a congregation. How is that, how does that impact, grow it, restrict it? I mean, what's next with that? And also from a design point of view, in the sense of where we are in the community. What does it mean to be here on Georgia Avenue and adjacent to the Woodside community? What does it mean for the environment? How are these topics addressed? So we have come up with some dates to have informational sessions where we will bring in some people that we have identified that can give us some perspective and give us some information on what this can be like from these three areas: financial, mission-driven, and environmental/community design. And we'll have a chance as a congregation to gather at these informational sessions. And then for a few weeks after each one, a chance for small groups to discuss, to raise the question, to the thorny thing that's bothering or causing that question. What does it mean for this to happen in this way? What does it mean for me as a congregational member? What does it mean for my neighbor? What does it mean for the person across the aisle or in the pew behind me? So that's sort of a big picture next steps, which would then give us all an opportunity to listen, question, wrestle with these ideas and this information, to then have a congregational meeting in June to really make a decision what we as a congregation would like to do and how we would like whatever decision we make, how that would look going forward. So, did I leave anything out of that timeline?
Just wanted to say really quickly that as a vision team, we've seen a number of options for what's possible. We've seen very small number of units, right, so that we might offer. Or what it might look like to build a couple of affordable purchase townhomes. We've seen what might be possible if we put 160 units of housing on our property. We've seen a vast difference, right? The goal of this discernment process is for us as a congregation to get clear about what matters to us most and what our community most needs from us, right? Because it's not just about us, right? We're called to serve the community, but what the community most needs from us and whatever development we do moving forward. And again, what we're asking you to do today is to bless a discernment period, not actually make a decision. A discernment period where we're learning about what's possible.
Off. Now it's on. Yeah, I mean, I think I really appreciate the chance to have this moment of pausing and sharing with you some of what we've learned. I think it's been great getting to know the members of this visioning team and talking about, you know, what we hope to see and the fears that we have and the things that make us excited. And it has been really interesting to see the different possibilities that could come from this space. But my brain is always, it's like a million steps ahead to a bazillion questions, all of which seem very complicated and hard. And so I'm thankful that this time to ask for blessing and for thinking about the next step comes, because I think it lets us open this conversation with all of you in a more tangible and concrete way. So it's a way to share some of the information, not just today and what we're learning, but as Bill said, with these through 3 different sessions to learn, and then time for us to be in small group community together, sharing the things that are exciting, the things we have loved about this space that we need to keep, and the things that we love about our community and fear they need, and ways that we might be able to fill that need. So I just am excited that we've had this chance to share with you our thoughts on it, and excited to open a door to start to hear your thoughts and work through some of this stuff with the broader congregation.
And just to follow up a little bit on what Beth was saying, as I mentioned earlier, I've been a member of this church for 22 years, and this church is my family. It's very important to me that the survival of this church is wanted to see this church around for a long time. And some of the things that we're talking about, the care and expenses that we have, be hard in the long run, unless we really other opportunities, other approaches that we can take. This church is important to me. I've spent a good portion of my life here. I know a lot of you out there and been a part of a lot of committees and meetings with a lot of you there. And this is where I come for my peace, and I'd like to
think that with the knowledge that there are resources within the conference and our community and our local government to help us explore the possibilities for affordable housing on a portion of our site, it feels like a faithful next step to learn about potentially expanding our mission to serve our community in another way.
Michelle at the back has an outline for the proposed discernment process that the Vision team would like to offer the congregation, and we're going to start passing that out now. As that happens, what I'd like to offer is that we find ourselves in a really unique moment as a congregation. Many congregations find themselves arriving at this place in a space of reactivity. There's an immediate crisis they have to address financially that they try to attempt addressing through developing affordable housing, which does provide some regular income to a church. We are not there. The gift that we have right now is that rather than being reactive to an emergency or a problem, although as we've named, there are some significant challenges that we face, we have the chance to be responsive, to dream, to be creative, to be playful, to have meaningful conversations with our community in a way that allows us to meet the needs both of our neighbors and our congregation for years and years and years and years to come. I don't want to downplay that fact, that this is not something that we have to do right now. There will come a day when that may be true. And that's also important for me as your pastor to name. That as we look at the landscape of Christianity in the world, we look at the giving trends in our congregation and the fact that though we're growing, we have not, in recent memory, been able to, with congregational giving alone, cover our budget. We will not be able to sustain the witness of this community for that same generations and generations and generations vision to come to fruition. So we have a unique opportunity with that knowledge to, rather than react to it, be responsive. And that's what this discernment proposal outlines. Reverend Michelle, I'm going to snag one of those from you if that's okay. So what we're proposing are 3 conversations that are both centered on the community and on our congregation. That would be presented and recorded for everybody to engage. So if you're joining us online, there would be a way for you to participate in those as well. The first is going to explore the social impact of development, and you'll see some of the core questions there. How does affordable housing impact our community? Both those who call this church home, because the truth is that all of our staff live below 80% of the area median income. All of our staff do. And how will it impact our congregation? Financially, and how will it impact our neighbors? What kind of impact do we want to have, right, as we face the realities of the affordable housing crisis in our nation, as we look to the needs of our neighbors in the future? The second conversation is one about finances. What are the financial factors that go into this decision? And there are lots of them. How will this impact our congregation now and in the future? What is the potential impact this could have on our neighbors who are daily having to make decisions between getting their prescriptions and paying their rent? And how do we want to serve those neighbors who are most in need? And the third is a conversation about design impact. What does the development look like? What do we want to build based upon who we want to serve and who we feel called to serve? What do we want it to look like? How do we want it to have an impact on the way that we live on the earth, use the physical resources we've been given in ways that are sustainable and that care for the environment? Each of these presentations, and 2 of our speakers, Rick and Michael, are here with us, are going to last for about an hour with lots of time for questions and answers. And then in the 2 or 3 weeks between each presentation, there are going to be a number of roundtable conversations. 6 to 8 persons is what we're proposing, facilitated by members of the Leadership Council and the Vision Team, to explore with people in detail and at depth these questions, right? Who do we want to impact? How do we want to have impact? What do we want to see? Who do we want to be? Each of those conversations will then be given back and recorded in a way that allows the whole congregation to engage them. We've not identified necessarily the mechanism for what that would be, but our goal would be to make all of that feedback available. At the end of that 12-week period, as Kevin shared, sometime in June, we would call a special charge conference led by our district superintendent and affirm the decision to move forward with developing affordable housing on the property. That doesn't mean that's when we make a decision about a building, however. So for all of you wannabe architects, like I was as a child, that's not your season. Because then what happens is the church empowers a building committee. Those are members of our congregation who are given the authority on our behalf to finalize plans for development, both financially and in terms of design. They then come back to the congregation, because you know we Methodists, we like our meetings. They come back to the congregation and they present what they propose on our behalf. There is another vote in the congregation. That plan then goes to our district committee on building and grounds, who has to vote to approve it. It then goes to our conference committee on building and grounds, which has to approve it. And then it goes to the annual conference, probably sometime in 2024, if we vote to move forward, for them to vote on it before we start doing anything here on the property. And so even if we agree that we want to do development, we're looking at a 12 to 18 month window just to make the final decisions we need to make. And as we'll learn in the financial presentation, there's even longer periods of time to figure out all the complex financing that goes into something like developing affordable housing. So I say that to help us understand that this is not going to be a rushed process. It's not going to be a rushed job. We're going to have to take our time, and that is one of the gifts of being methodical in the way of Mr. Wesley. Vision team, is there anything else that y'all wanted to offer about your hopes for the discernment process or why you feel like it's important? So before we vote on whether or not we would like to move forward with a discernment process, are there questions that you have for us as the Vision team or thoughts you'd like to offer? And just a reminder for those of you online, we're monitoring the Facebook chat if there are questions you'd like to leave there.
Hello, Sarah Hasmer, she, her, hers pronouns. As the Director of Housing Justice at the National Women's Law Center, I'm very excited for this work. And after looking at the critical elements of those 3 breakouts, just wanted to offer some food for thought, so to speak, is that we have a severe affordable housing crisis, as we know, especially for extremely low-income renters. There is an even worse supply gap with accessible housing, and so in our work, it's very important for us to name the need for accessible and affordable housing. And so just some thought for the social impact or design impact. It may have been implicitly already in there, but if there is a way to perhaps more explicitly name that we also want to promote not just accessible spaces within the church space, but also some accessible housing units as well.
My name is Shannon Parkin, and I've been a member of this church since 2008, and I have lived within a mile of this church for over 25 years. And I am so excited about this possibility because it improves the possibility that, you know, for our finances, and it means that we can be accessible. That is near and dear to my heart. I walk on partial feet. Because of this congregation, you all have helped me, you know, when I've had to climb the stairs here in this church. This church is my home. You all are my family. But accessibility is so important. And I also have had the privilege of being part of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And we offer we've been offering a support group in the fellowship hall. It's broken my heart to be able to have to tell the program director that we're not accessible to people who might want to attend, who might be in a wheelchair. But that is the reality that we're facing, that the situation is. You know, we haven't had, you know, but having a fully accessible place is so important, as I know we are a congregation that is welcoming to everyone. Thank you.
Hi, Judy Shirk, retired clergy member of the Northern Illinois Conference, but I've lived here and attended here for 5 years now. And all of this is very important to me as well. I'm also a member of the Racial Justice Ministries, and we are focusing on affordable housing and housing in general in this county as our focus for this year. I have just a procedural question, and that is, did you say that the presentations will be recorded, and does that mean they will be available to persons who can't attend on those dates?
Absolutely. Our goal would be that those are both streamed and recorded for future use, so that if you're not able to make those meetings, you can still participate in the conversation and then use that to help springboard the small group conversations you'd be having in those 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andy Sullivan. I just want to say this all sounds fantastic, and thank you for your work so far. Looking forward to this process going forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin Davis. This is my husband Brad. We're actually fairly new to this congregation, although we are both lifelong Methodists. Really deeply so. And as a young person in this community, we moved to Silver Spring in 2018. We were in the district before then, and as a young person living in this area, affordable housing is non-existent. So my husband and I, we bought a house in 2020. Our realtor told us we love Woodside. Our realtor told us we would need a budget of $800,000 to start looking in this neighborhood. Let that sink in for 1 second. And we actually bought a house mainly because we would get to pay the same amount of money in our mortgage for 30 years instead of, our townhouse that we lived in downtown Silver Spring is more than our current mortgage. And I'm a lawyer, he's a teacher. We have lots and lots of resources. And, for someone who has, one more story, when I left this area, I grew up in Arlington, and I left after I graduated from undergrad, I left to go to Philly because I could actually afford to work a fairly minimum wage job and live with someone else, not live with my parents. And that was in 2011. That was over 10 years ago, so 15 at this point. So it is, affordable housing, whatever that means. I don't know if we're looking at like really low income, middle income, somewhere, 80% of, what do they call it? MAGA or whatever. It's something that I'm deeply passionate about. It's something that my husband is deeply passionate about because we have seen and just experienced the absolute crunch that is trying to be a young person in this area, making what sounds like a lot of money, seems like a lot of money, and just finding rent. $2,000 is just a normal amount of rent for around here, and that's a lot of money.
Hey, I'm Brad. So we aren't yet members of this church, but because of conversations like this and the community that we have met, we are joining this church. So I think this is I wasn't, thanks for that, I guess. But I think it is important to know and to hear that this is a vital conversation, and if the church is going to be relevant in 2023, 2024, 2040, this conversation must happen. And I think that as a church, we need to keep going this direction, and this is what's inviting me into this church. It is this space, it's these people, it's this community that we need to keep going, right? So I want to applaud you all, one person for all of you, that this is something that must happen to stay relevant as a church on this corner in Silver Spring and to have a vital mission going forward. This is things that need to happen.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. You all have done such good work. It is hard work, and I think we're all very grateful for you. My question is about whether we will have any access to the folks in the stories who have already been down this path before, right? Like this is an initiative with the conference and with the district, because we're not the only ones having these conversations, right? And so others have been down this road before, so to the extent that we may be able to hear from some of them, I think that might also be a valuable resource as we dream and imagine and do this work together.
We've tried to make some connections with Reverend Joe Daniels, who some of you will know is the lead pastor at Emory Fellowship Church just down the road on Georgia, who engaged in a similar project. We've not been able to get on Joe's calendar yet, as you can imagine. He's a pretty busy guy. We have had the chance to have conversation with Sam Marullo, who is the Conference Affordable Housing Coordinator, around some of the projects that are taking place in the conference. One of the things that has set the conversation we're having apart is that many of the congregations that are moving forward right now are in a place where they need to move forward or lose their property completely. And so this is what's made this interesting for me. In some ways, we are setting the stage for how other congregations could have this conversation moving forward, which is really exciting, right? We have the opportunity in the discernment and whatever we decide to do to give other congregations the resources they need to have this conversation. Other community partners we've engaged with, so we've spent a good amount of time with the chair of the zoning committee for the Woodside neighborhood. I had the chance to meet with the zoning committee, and they have, insofar as they can without us having actual plans, said that they applaud us moving forward. They shared some concerns that we've taken into account. We've had the chance to have some initial conversations with members of the county planning committee, with members of the county council, including County Executive Elrich, Evan Glass, and Will Jawando. And I've had some conversation personally with Jared Solomon as well. And then of course Rick and Michael have been with us on this journey too, helping offer some resources and clarity about what's available for congregations.
Hello, so Darren Fenwick. Just two questions. The first question is, and I think the answer is yes based on what I've heard so far. Will there be a discussion in any of the roundtables about what resources are available from the county to support this work if the congregation goes down this road? So for example, the Housing Opportunities Commission, et cetera, just kind of laying out, these are sort of the things in the county. The other question is, will there also be, or can there be, a discussion about, when it comes to affordability, we talk about area median income, but of course if somebody may be, a little bit over that, but based on their circumstances, if it's student loans, if it's other kind of bills, where they still may not qualify because they don't meet the area median income, but they still may be, they may not be able to afford a house, in other words. So is there any flexibility, or will there be some discussion about changes to potential affordability requirements that we would be able to make if we wanted to?
Are you okay if I take this?
Please.
So the short answer is, if we decide to go forward with this kind of project, this congregation has a huge say in what it looks like. So the FAQ packet that I hope everyone has a copy of, there's a lot of the technical definitions of these things, but we still have if we go forward with this, we have a great deal of say. In fact, I won't say 100%, but I would say maybe 93%. I don't know. We have a lot of say in what that looks like and how it defines. So that's a great question, but yeah, so we could. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to say this is very informative, and making the most use out of space is very important. So thank you for all your work on this. But I just wanted to clarify, you are saying that because this church is very important to my family and to many people here, everybody here at the church, but it's not, is it my understanding that it's not so cut and dry as in, if we do affordable housing, this is what has to go in the church, and this is what there is going to be, as if like this part may have to be, this is like there will be options of changes that will also be part of what's being voted on or considered, right? So that, like, Pastor Will, you were talking about the sanctuary not being, being part of that, and so there will be, when you, in part of it talking about designs, we will actually get to be able to see what it could look like if, say, the education wing were changed or part of it removed or all of it removed, but we would see those options beforehand and have a visual of what all that means and how those changes would impact, say, our children's educations and even to grow back, because we were very viable with our youth and our children's ministries before COVID, and unfortunately, that all got decimated. But that, it has the potential to grow back to being large again. So my concern of, well, when you say, oh, the whole education wing, I get nervous because I'm like, where will our youth grow? But there will be talks about that. I mean, we will get lots of information on that, correct?
Absolutely,
I just wanna make sure I
And
understand that.
just as an example, Becky, the team has seen a couple of different images of what could be possible. We kind of went back and forth about whether or not we wanted y'all to see those necessarily, just because we didn't want anybody thinking it's cut and dried. But the point is, we've seen options for what could happen if we didn't do anything with our existing footprint and we just had, part of the parking lot go away. We've seen what it might look like to lose a portion of the education building or all of the education building. But none of those decisions, this team can't make any of those decisions. The whole congregation has to do that. And it would be the building committee that we vote to empower that would ultimately begin that conversation to bring back a plan for us to approve or not approve. Yeah, really good question. Okay. Nope. There is a good Methodist. There is a good Methodist. I move the question. Well, Robert's Rules is the closest thing to the Bible of Satan I've ever read, so we're not going to necessarily use Robert's Rules in this place. What I'd like to invite us to do before we vote is to pray. And to ground ourselves in prayer, and then we'll be asked to, by a vote of acclamation or not, approve the discernment process. But let's pray. God of grace and God of glory, on your people pour your power and your vision, your creativity and your openness. On your people called Silver Spring United Methodist Church, pour your vision for what is possible on this corner for this community. Help us as we approach this decision. Do so with the openness of those who know that no matter what may come in the road ahead, you are still God, you are still with us, and you will never, ever leave or forsake us. We pray this in the power of Jesus' name. Amen. So friends, I would invite you, if you would affirm the discernment plan as it's been outlined by our vision team, to say amen. Amen. And if you would not affirm that plan, I invite you to say amen. It sounds like the amens have it. So, here's what you can expect in the next couple of weeks. There are a number of ways for you to go ahead and begin responding. If you're excited about this, actually, Beth, will you share with us some of the ways that people can engage?
Well, and it is on this time. All the times I've forgotten to turn it on, it's actually on this time. Yes, so we're so excited, and I feel like we'll reach out to every single one of you that asked a question, so watch out. There's an email address that's included in the discernment opportunities. You're welcome to email that if you have a question or if you would like to be more involved or if you'd like to hear updates or what have you, whatever it is you need, let us know. I have a sign-up sheet that's just an old-fashioned paper that I'll have that we can look at today. If you'd like to think of ways you can work with or support our visioning team somehow, maybe that's helping us host some of these roundtables or supporting some of the logistics over the next 12 weeks, you're welcome to mark that on this sign-up sheet. Or if you just want to make sure you're included in emails about the roundtables, you can also mark that on this sheet. Information about when the roundtables will be scheduled will come out, of course, with our with the e-news, and will be announced from the church, and will be announced during the meetings themselves. But I especially encourage you to reach out through that email or sign up with me if you have certain scheduling quirks or things you're worried about that might prevent you from attending a roundtable. If you are like me and have a pack of young children and you're not quite sure if you'll be able to join one, we want to make sure that everyone who would like to participate can. So that might mean we have some that are Zoom, might mean we do some Saturday mornings at the park. It could look a whole bunch of ways, but we won't know how to help make those accessible to folks unless if we know. So please be open with that. And of course, you're welcome to find any of us, I imagine, through the church. Glad to answer questions.
So I'll point out 3 dates for you for the presentations that are upcoming. The conversation on social impact is going to take place, the presentation will take place on Wednesday, March 15th at 7 p.m. That'll be right here in our sanctuary, and it will be live streamed. The conversation on financial impact will take place the Sunday after Easter, which feels a little incongruous, but that's a different theological conversation. So Sunday, April 16th at 11:30 a.m., we'll gather to learn a little bit more about how projects like this are financed, what the financial implications would be. And then on Saturday, May 13th, we'll gather to have a conversation about the design impact on Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Our goal is to try and provide childcare of some sort at those gatherings if we can. I know I'm just realizing I'm catching Miss Marie off guard with that, so Marie, I apologize. I had not emailed you about that, but we'll work to get that covered. And then the final date that I'll point out for you is June 4th, 2023, which is when we anticipate that we will gather for a special charge conference to vote on next steps. So go ahead and get those on your calendar. There are registration links now available on our website for all of those conversations. If you would like to go ahead and register, or of course you can sign up with Beth. I also want to highlight again that Rick Edson and Michael Weincheck are with us. They've been consulting with us. I'm going to invite them to join us up here at the end of our presentation. And if you've got additional conversations for us, you can bring those questions up at that time. Thank you, friends. I'm excited for what God is stirring up among us, and I can't wait for the good trouble we'll get into along the way.